In this video, I'm going to break down whether or not I think Automobolista2 is worth you spending your hard-earned money on. In order to do this, we'll take a look back at the history of how it went through early access until it got to the point where it is today, or yesterday, as it fully, officially dropped. We'll take a look at the different types of sim races, such as if you're a VR user or if you like multiplayer, and if it would be a good suit for you. And then finally, we'll have a look at the summary, including the value. We'll take a look at the graphics, the audio quickly, and the AI and things that it offers. And hopefully this leads all of us to a nice, clear-cut answer by the end of the video, whether or not it would be a good suit for you. So with that said, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see further Automobolista2 videos or anything else sim racing. This is a gaming-oriented channel, but you never quite know what you're going to get. If you want to see my future videos come up in your recommended or come up in your subscription box, then feel free to hit the button. And with that said, let's move on to the video. How about stock car? These are big in Europe, aren't they? Oof, look at the colour options. Alright, let's keep our McLaren-ish colours. And let's get it. Do we have anyone on this board here? Yes, we do. Plenty. 121, also the time to beat on Adelaide circuit. Let's do it. Ooh, left-hand drive. Ooh. Loose in the rear, mid-engine. No rev match, rev counter, anything. Oh, boys. I made a mistake. And that will lead us into the history or the little intro of Automobolista2. So it had a rocky launch when it came to its early access. From my observation, there was some good momentum with it. There was some good interest. It made some purchases and it actually had the community buzzing a little bit because there wasn't much happening. ACC had come out, but it had come out, established itself. It went through its down patch before they kind of patched things up and brought it to a point where I think the general public really like it or they don't. But either way, it's made its foot. It's got its first DLC out and it's here to stay, and a great game in its own ways. Following suit, Automobolista2 comes out on the hype train. They've been marketing it quite well, getting people's attention, and then here it is, launched on early access with a pretty good entry-level deal to get those early supporters in the door. What happened then was a lot of people come in, heard it was from the Madness engine, and were a little bit skeptical because Project Cars 2 has such a emotional attachment to it. Some people love it. Some people downright love it, say it's one of the best things to happen to sim racing because it really did come in and make a big footprint in its own way. So one of the strongest offerings when it comes to consoles, made it really great across the board, sold a lot of titles, and it was actually personally my first game that I got into when it comes to sim racing and trying to race in general. I used to try and do so with a keyboard. So in that aspect, it really does offer a lot to all the different types of sim races there is. It had a good online system, AI. You could play it somewhat with a controller and stuff like that, although it was terrible still. But nonetheless, Madness engine was what brought that game to be, and Automobolista2 comes out of the door telling everyone we're running off the Madness engine, and of course that's going to spark some debate initially on whether or not that is a good move. So the game comes out, first week of early access, caught my attention. I had to think about it, end up picking it up and paid attention to the community and the sim racing pages about what was happening. So I particularly enjoyed it. The force feedback they were going for initially was a nice surprise. Coming from iRacing background, mostly, and everyone knows about the happenings there where the tyre model doesn't allow, and pro drivers have said this after they've come across with everything that's happened this year. Joseph Newgarden, for example, the IndyCar driver, has clearly established and announced what he thinks about it and the differences between iRacing and real racing. And the one thing he had to say about it was there's no play on the verge of grip loss. There's no maximum threshold with the tyre. It's almost like you can push a car, but then all of a sudden, bang, you're off the edge, you spin out. There's no playing with the oversteer. And I think a lot of people want to see that, and I'm sure that that will be the next big move for that title in particular. But that's where AMS2 come in my mind, the first reaction I got for it. And you could play with that verge of oversteer. It's wild. The one term that I would call it, and did use at that time, was it is wild. The car feels powerful. It feels like it's 6 or 7 horsepower pushing through the tires in a vehicle that's dropped all its weight in order to be the fastest race car it can. And funnily enough, that's exactly what a race car is. So to me, that amount of power, that feeling of it being wild, was a really nice change. But I can definitely see how people got the arcade feel for it, and if they were pushing it too far in their mind, well, then it would kind of take away from trying to go after that simulation feel that AMS1 did. Since then, over the course of a few months, keeping up to date with the Razer Studios Facebook page and everything, watching closely on their updates, reading through the patch notes and seeing what they're doing, there's been many changes to the force feedback, AI tweaks, content changes, content additions, and it's been a very strong suit from the business and the developers as a whole in the workload that they're putting in. They're really setting the bar for consistent, great updates that are genuinely trying to make the experience good for its players. So since the beginning of early access until the point of the last day where it dropped, the game has almost transformed itself into something new, and that brings with it the most crucial question on is it worth your dollars now compared to when it first came out in early access, because one of the themes that I did see was a lot of refunds on the title. To establish this on an individual basis on whether or not people should spend their dollars on it, let's break down the different types of sim races, in my mind, that there is. There could be more, but generally, I think it breaks down to the multiplayer / hardcore individuals, aka the iRacers, the ones that want that massive, strong multiplayer base, all about racing competitively. We then have our VR users and the immersion experience type. We have the people that are just out to have a good time, have fun, and enjoy. Kind of like Forza Horizon drivers, but maybe want a bit better experience with a wheel. Then finally, coming in as one final more category, it would probably be story-driven. For example, Formula 1 games, Formula 1 2019, where you follow the path of a Formula 2 driver trying to get scouted, getting offerings from a team depending on how you went in that small, short, but story kind of inspired Formula 2 ending of a season that you have, and the drama with, I can't remember the main guy driver, but either way, there's drama, there's some trying to spark some emotion, have a bit of a storyline, such as maybe an NBA game, or I think Madden has storylines, I'm not really sure, but kind of more along the lines of a sport-based storyline experience there. Going more into depth then and answering individually, if you are an iRacer, if you're a more multiplayer driven person, you spend big bucks on your rig, you pay the subscription, you buy all the tracks purely for the most intensive, score focused, leaderboard driven competition. You just want to win in your spare time. You think about how to improve lap times, become an alien, chop off a tenth of a second here and there. Would AMS2 suit you? Probably not. Now, one thing that you will notice is even though it offers a good time trial experience and it's got the multiplayer lobbies, the game just doesn't have the volume of players in order to have full servers all the time. And even though it's been a day into launch now, if you still refresh the servers page, you'll probably see there's only 3 or 4 that are worthwhile joining. The rest will be 0 out of 12 players, 0 out of 20. Some will be volume-wise, like I said, the 3 or 4. Even though it's really easy to set up these servers and race competitively, the volume just isn't there. It's not really what their target audience is, which makes sense when it comes to seeing the volume of players in the multiplayer lobbies. But nonetheless, I will definitely be trying out the multiplayer. I think with what the game offers as a whole, that the actual multiplayer service would be awesome, but you would be disappointed if you bought the game purely for multiplayer and then you open up the servers and see that there's not too many people online. Second category, the VR users. Now, my personal experience, I don't have a VR headset, but I am well aware of the just amazing feedback the game receives in Facebook comments, update, patch notes, just the response that you'll see people publicly saying back to the developers and within group chats and forums and things like that of how great the VR experience is. I've seen video content of people using VR headsets, clips here and there, and it kind of makes my jaw drop on how immersive it looks. I've never really been interested too much in a VR headset purely on the basis that it takes a while to set up. You've got your 3 monitors generally, which are easier to use, and some games are a bit clunky with it. I know that ACC, Assetto Corsair Competition, how it has some frame issues, which is so much load on a VR system because the technology is relatively new and it requires a lot of power. Automobolista2 has hit a very, very good sweet spot here on an engine that supplies amazing graphics, and we will touch on that later on in the video, but it also offers the VR support without destroying your system. You don't need a supercomputer to have a great VR experience, and from the videos I've seen, it looks flawless almost, especially when you factor in the different weather settings it has, all the different cars, all the different tracks, and some of the Brazilian stuff that you've never even heard about. You can jump in, VR headset on, and have a very smooth time with its VR use. So in that aspect, if you are a die-hard VR user, it's make or break for you whether or not a game has VR, because you want to feel that immersion and you have the system and the hardware ready to go. Automobolista2 is absolutely, in my mind, one of the games for you. Now, what if you just want to have fun? You just want to enjoy racing cars, experiencing just wildness and fun, and it's your escape on a weekend. You don't want to race competitively. You don't want to work on the perfect inputs to get tenths of a second off your lap time in order to be a complete alien, because it takes way too much effort and time in order to get to that stage. Well then, you're probably someone that enjoys Forza Horizon, or even Forza games, or Need for Speed Heat, the newest title that's been out. If you enjoy stuff like that, where you don't kind of have a judgmental view on arcade style games or ones that lean more towards that, but maybe you do have a wheel and want to experience racing a little bit more, well then again, AMS2 comes in here. It's going more for the simulation feel, absolutely, but in the content that it offers, the time trial, which you can get competitive and see how quick you can go against the world, but it also has a really ease of use AI system with any type of difficulty, any mixture of cars, any type of track. If you want to race trucks, if you want to race like weird stuff, if you want to race go-karts, no, they're not weird, but nonetheless a varying different amount of content, then definitely this is one of those ones that ticks the boxes on if you just want to have fun. That's mostly probably one of the reasons why I bought this game and had no consideration on refunding it back, is because it is so much fun. It is so easy to turn it on, set up a race in cars, and they feel powerful, they feel oversteery, like a race car would in my mind, and it really does tick that box. I really like the hardcore end of iRacing, but I also like driving around in Forza Horizon and hotting up cars and things like that. I never bought Need for Speed. I'd never be one of those ones that gets it on release day, but definitely AMS2 was one that I did get on release day because they're touching in the middle almost. Really great force feedback experience with a wheel, but also it's just super fun and easy to play. Finally, driven, if you're a story-focused person, you loved Formula 1 2019 or maybe 2020 because it's in its lead-up phase right now. It's early access, or not early access, but pre-order phase where you can get onto it early. And it's story-driven, where you want to experience yourself in the seat of a driver trying to work their way up the ranks, as if you were actual doing it in real life. Is this game for you? No. They've just added their campaign version, or whatever, their championship version. And it does have a pretty nifty little system, so you can pick your series that you're in, and it has half an hour practice sessions followed by hour races. Much more thorough simulation representing races. But the problem is, you set it up yourself. It's almost a blend of It's single player racing, but just more advanced, more serious version of its single player AI racing. There's no story, there's no cutscenes from what I've seen. They might add some in, but there's no making your character and following along the steps of an actual driver. So in that aspect, if you're someone that wants to follow along as a pro with a story in car racing, this one's definitely not for you, I'd say. It's more about making your own events and following along. If you're a big enough car fan, you'll find the joy in it. You will pitch yourself still as the driver, but do you ever get to see yourself out of the car? Not from what I've seen. So there's the 5 focuses, the 5 different categories that I believe, and we'll quickly recap on them. We had the multiplayer focus users, VR, want to have fun individuals, and story driven. That's only 4. That's good math right there. We have multiplayer. If you're a hardcore multiplayer, no, not the game for you. VR users, absolutely the game for you. Want to have heaps of fun, such as you like Forza Horizon, for example. Absolutely, it's for you. Story-driven focus, not really. 50-50. You can make your own, but like I said, you don't follow along the career of an individual. Summarizing it all together, we'll quickly touch on the sounds, the graphics, and the AI. So the AI is continuously having tweaks, so this might change in the future. But something that I've noticed is the AI, it's not balanced in its consistency. And what I mean by that is it fits one aspect of it perfectly. If you're racing, you're in the lead, but you're dropping pace, you can see the characters or the other guys coming up behind you, and you have that little arrow, just like the Formula 1 games do, that shows you if they're getting close or not and what the direction they're in, just in case they're in their blind spot. You'll probably toggle that off, but it is actually a great feature. I do like the idea of it. What will happen though is even with your aggressiveness turned down, like about 60, and the maximum I think is 100 or maybe even 110, 120, the aggression from these guys is pretty wild. So because they have such a big scale here, a large amount of difference in what you can set, it would be hard from a development point of view to get this perfect. But I've noticed that whatever I had the AI set on, which wasn't super high, they like to dive bomb. And that's good. You need to be, in a real race, people aren't going to be super careful with you, super cautious and allow you to own the track. No, they're going to try and dive up the inside if they find an opening. Just like Ayrton Senna at Suzuka. And that's exactly how I would represent the AI, the term I would use for the AI in the average setting for their aggression and their difficulty. They will do an Ayrton Senna on you, maybe not into the chicane, but on most corners in order to pass. And that's great. That makes great racing. The problem is when you try and do it back to them, from what I've experienced, and until they patch this a little bit further, they are not balanced in the same way. They will not give you the room that they force you to give them. And that, a lot of the time, can result in some crashes. I'm sure they'll tweak it a little bit more. I made an in-depth video on this, if you want to click the card up in the corner, about the most annoying aspect of AMS2. But with that said, otherwise, the AI is pretty great. They crash, they have accidents with each other, they hit the wall, they lose grip, and that makes for a real immersive experience. They're not robots, they don't all follow the single file line for the next 10 laps. They do race each other. And in that aspect, it makes up for any problem that the game may have, purely from how much fun that seeing like the computer coded to battle each other is crazy. So AI, I think, is in a really good spot. The sounds are not going to make up for the amount of work that went into Assetto Corsa competition. They spent, from what I gather, a lot of funds on that, a lot of skill, and a lot of very professional individuals to get that to where it needs to be. And in my mind, it is the best sounding game on the market. Especially as you come down the main straight, you can hear your sound of the car vibrating back off the wall, or rebounding back off the wall of the main straight. Every time I come past, it puts a grin on my face, hearing my GTR or the BMW blow off valves a little bit as you come in. Now, in the sound department, the AMS2 can really lean towards that more epic feel. So I love the turbo sounds. Some of the cars in there are ridiculous in the turbo sounds that they have, and I love every bit of that. But it's a bit hit and miss. Some of the V8 cars, for example, will sound a bit monotone, like they haven't had a real microphone strapped to the engine of a real race car on a real track, for example. So a lot of the time they'll try and create the sounds that they think suit. Some are really great. For example, some of the turbo cars, like I mentioned, just make your jaw drop at the sound of the blow-off or when they rev out and hit the limiter and things like that. The tyre sound comes in at a nice balance and things like that. Is it as good as ACC? No, but is it good? In my mind, I think it is. And finally, the graphics. Like I said, touching on the VR aspect of this game, the graphics are amazing. The different weather settings that you have, puddles building up on the track, you can see the water on the nose of your Formula car. All amazing stuff. If you're a big individual graphics focused person, maybe you lean towards ACC. Some people don't like the chunky feel of ACC, but you can't deny that the detail it's in the game. But the downside with that, is the amount of stress it puts on your system. And when I try and record on OBS or use a pretty soft recording software, like it's not a hard one on your system, I can do many other games with it. If I run that game in 3 monitors, I have to turn the graphics down. It just ruins my computer. It ruins my Asus 2070 graphics card. Whereas AMS2 does not do that. The graphics look stunning, but they've somehow done it and not ruined your computer at the same time while trying to run it. So graphics are awesome, sounds are good, and AI is pretty awesome as well. Finally, rounding up the summary of this game, we have to add in the value of it. So if you've watched this not too long after I've uploaded, they've had quite good onboarding programs with their value saving. So if you are one of the first in the door, you got a great saving. I believe it might have even been 40% off if you pre-ordered it or something like that, if you had it in the early access. And I've had it this whole time and seen it evolve. Even still, they have an early offer. And if you do buy it and before up to September, I think, when the Steam Summer Sale ends, you still get Hockenheimring and stuff for free. You get Bathurst in there for free. The value is amazing. They have a massive plan of DLC over the next few years. So you'll see a lot of people freak out when they see the season pass and game bundle, just because it comes in at over the $100 mark for a title straight out the box. But in my mind, I almost see that as 2 or 3 full-fledged titles within that, and just the amount of work I know the developers put in, and from what we've heard that's coming. So even in the release trailer, for example, they dropped Bathurst with the release. Beautiful way to go about your release. And then in the release trailer, you see that the Nordschleife, the Nürburgring, a clip of a car ripping up that track. Like, what a sneaky way to market. And I think that deserves almost a round of applause. The developers really know their market, what they're going for, and how to please a sim racer. So with that said, be sure to like this video if you found any help at all with your purchase. I really hope that it ticks, you could individualize it, you could listen to the information and kind of take it in as your own person compared to someone else that will take the information in differently. And hopefully that led you to a decision on whether or not it's worth your money. In my mind, it completely is. I'm very happy I got it, and I'm sure I have many, many more hours of fun with this value title that's just come out. Thanks for watching, guys. I will see you next time.